Hello, hello.
Welcome. This is so full circle. Your book was one of the first video books we ever made. So this is a really exciting day for me.
Yeah, it was a wonderful experience. It was amazing to see how much technology and how many people were involved. And I have to say that the process of video editing or video books is much more elaborate than the process of a regular book. Many more people are involved, many hours, but I was very grateful for the final product.
Oh, well, we were thrilled with it. And we're so happy to hear you say that. Although I can't imagine your research process is as easy.
No,
So,
research. You know, I think this is one of the things that is um, I've done that I feel is a little bit misleading. That the research, the research process is usually described in how it works, but lots of things are not described. Um, Human subjects committee are not described, and bureaucracy and fundraising, but also at the end of the day, we describe the experiments that worked out, and we don't describe the experiments that don't work out. And just because we have a limited topic, and knowledge is being advanced by things that work, not that sometimes by things that don't work, but not often. And I have a lot of people who write me and say, "I want to do what you do," and I say, "Great." But it's very different to read about research and to do it. And do you really like it? And what I propose usually to people is to try it out. There are some things that we could intuit we would like you would say, if I told you, how would it feel like to sit next to a beautiful beach and drinking whatever martini. Even if you haven't been by the beach, but you've seen pictures, or you've been by a lake and you haven't had a martini, you had something else, you can guess what it is. But guessing what it is to do research is a little tough.
yes.
You really like the details. Do you really like the repetition and so on? So I usually tell people that enjoying reading it is not the same as enjoying doing research, and they should try it out. I say volunteer for 6 weeks and see if this is really your passion.
Well, we already have an incredible tip. So anyone who wants to be like Dan Ariely, who's here in this chat, go research for 6 weeks and give him a shout out on his website. I know you love to get your emails in. And yes, I mean, the amount of edits we go through before we release them are too many to count.
Yeah.
So I definitely understand. But we're so thrilled you do your research so you can bring us your incredible thoughts and ideas and the things that you find. Dan, not everyone here necessarily knows your full background and the full scope of your work. Would you mind just giving a little bit of an overview of how you got started in this industry and where you're at today?
Yeah. So maybe I'll do it by saying something about my half a beard, because that could be both an introduction and something about social science. So I wasn't born with half a beard.
What?
So this beard has three reasons. This half a beard has three reasons. The first one is I was badly burned. So much of my body is covered with scars, including the right side of my face. So I just don't have hair growing on this side. But of course, I could shave. And if I would shave, I wouldn't look as non-symmetrical as I do now. But until a few years ago, I shaved I shaved a lot often. And then a few years ago, I went on a month-long hike. At the end of this month-long hike, I looked sort of like this, slightly less white, but sort of like this. And I looked at the mirror for the first time, and I looked and I didn't like it. I didn't like this look. It's a very strange look. I looked at the mirror, I didn't like it, but I said, you know what? I'll keep it for 2 or 3 more weeks, just as a memento for the trip. I just finished this month-long hike. I haven't taken a month-long vacation ever. Let's keep, this is like a reminder of this trip.
It's your souvenir.
That's right. A temporary souvenir. And then the first surprising thing that happened was that I got notes from a few people who thanked me for the half a beard. Now, why did they thank me for the half a beard? These were people who were struggling with their own injuries. And they felt that they had to hide their own injury. And they wrote me, and they thought I was doing it on purpose. I didn't correct them. They thought I was doing it on purpose. And they said that it gave them a little bit of guts to hide a little bit less, to walk less with long sleeve shirt. I mean, all kinds of things like that. And when I got these notes, I thought, if this half a beard is helping somebody hide a little bit less, let me stay with this. So I stayed with it. But then the really surprising thing happened 4 months later, about 4 months later. And what happened was that I started feeling differently about my own burns, right? I have a lot of burns. I have lots of deformities. Lots of things are not functioning well. I have pain, all kinds of things. And what I realized is that I felt differently about my scars and deformities. I felt they were less something that happened to me and I had to deal with, and I felt it was more the story of my life. Like my acceptance of it increased. And I started thinking, why? What happened? Why do I all of a sudden feel better? And here is what I think. I didn't do randomized controls, but here's what I think. Think about shaving. If somebody that is not burned shave, they shave. If somebody like me shave, I start with no hair on this side and stubble on this side. I start a little bit non-symmetrical and I shave and I become less non-symmetrical, still a little bit. But now what that means that every act of shaving is also an act of hiding. Because it does both. It's shaving and making me less non-symmetrical. And I think that the psychology of hiding is not a healthy psychology. And the psychology of stopping it is actually quite good and quite healthy. Now, here's the final, I know you're not here to discuss facial hair, but the final thing is that, if you asked me 10 years ago, how would it feel like to have half a beard? I could very well predict how day one would look like. I would tell you it's not fun. People would ask questions, kids would laugh, people would point, all kinds of things would happen. I could predict day one, but there's nothing in me that could process the slow change of identity and acceptance that happened over 4 months. And I think that's for me the point about social science, is that there are many things in life, most of them are long-term and not short-term, that we just don't have good prediction powers about. It's very hard for us to say, how would it feel like 4 months later? And those are places that we make mistakes. And our challenge as social scientists is to try and, we can't change people's intuitions, but we can tell people, hey, here is something that happened to some people, why don't you try that as well? So I think it's all about finding clues and hints and directions for things that can make our life better, things that we're not able by just the force of our individual observation reason about. So we need that help to create this superpower of basically being able to look into our psyche, into the future, and make better plans.
Beautiful. I heard a quote the other day that was like, the height of wisdom is admitting how dumb you are. And I think, that your commitment to the human experience and to learning is something that has always really been something I am so stricken with from your work and from what you bring into your research.
If I can correct a little bit this height of wisdom.
Yeah, please do.
I think that it's not just about understanding, it's about doing things differently. So I like the idea of admitting how much we don't know and how limited we are and so on, but I don't think it's enough. I think the real trick is about trying to do things better. So whatever the definition is, I wanted to include also that part.
That's a very important part. Very important. Well, we have so much to get to today. I could literally just sit here and pick your brain, but I know everyone here is excited to hear you speak on a few themes. We also want to share some clips from the video book. So the first theme that we would like to discuss today is the idea of relativity, which you do such a great job breaking down. And so the concept of relativity we explored in the video book through The Economist, a British newspaper, which they used relativity to lure buyers in to purchasing at a higher price point. So let's take a look at that clip.
and I see an ad for a subscription for The Economist, a wonderful magazine.
The ad tempted him with three offers: the online version for $59, print for $125, and this is what got Ariely's attention: online and print, also for $125.
Why would anybody in the right mind take the physical version for $125 when they can get both the physical version and the online version for $125?
When Ariely presented 100 MIT students with these choices, 78 chose the combo online and print deal, 16 went with the online-only option, and no one chose the print-only version.
But now, if you have three options and one of them nobody chooses, you could say, why don't we take that away? Why show it at all? And here's the question. An option that nobody chose, print only for $125, did it have an effect?
It did. When presented with only two choices, 68 chose the cheaper online option, and only 32 chose the combo deal. Why did removing the print-only option have such an impact on the students' decisions?
First of all, we have to tip our hats to The Economist. They did understand something about human nature. And what they understood was the value of relativity. When you look at two options that are very far from each other, online for $59, a combo deal for $125, it's very hard to judge them.
But when you add the print option at the same price of $125, it's easy to compare the two, and so you choose the better combo deal.
This one, the decoy is pointing out into the direction of the combo deal being a great deal. Go ahead and buy it. And that's what people do.
We'll get back to the decoy in a bit, but first, why do we gravitate towards the two options that are easier to compare in the first place?
Brilliant. Brilliant. All right. First off, we left off with a bit of a cliffhanger there. So let's answer this in real time. Why do we gravitate toward those two options in the first place? What is happening here?
Yeah. So it turns out that relativity is a relatively a good algorithm for the brain in all kinds of things. Think back to when you were kids and your parents poured a little bit of juice for you and a little bit of juice for your brother and sister. How much juice they pour is very hard to figure out. Do you have more or less than your brother and sister? That's very easy. And this is where relativity is getting its strength, is that it's easy to compute. And because it's easy to compute, we over-rely on it. Now, you can even say, why do I care how much juice we have in general? Not as much. I do care about relative comparisons. By the way, there's another interesting argument. There's a joke that two friends are sleeping in a tent in the forest, and they hear a bear coming, and they get ready to run, and one friend is stopping and putting his shoes on, and his buddy is saying, "Run! You think the shoes will help you run faster than the bear?" He said, "No, I don't have to run faster than the bear. I have to run faster than you." The reality is relativity is not just important for evaluation, it's important for lots of things. Like, are you stronger than the other person? Do you have more food than them? So relativity is kind of a basic algorithm of the brain in all kinds of things. And it's true for vision. It's true for evaluation of how much we're willing to pay for something. It's true for what options we like. It's just a very, very general algorithm. Now, when you think about relativity, it's important how easy it is to compare something. So think about the last time you went to a restaurant. Every time, when you look at the drink menu, you could say to yourself, for this mojito, how many gallons of milk could I get? But that's not what you're doing. You're comparing the mojito to other, you're not even comparing it to beer. You're comparing the mojito to other cocktails, and you're comparing the appetizers to appetizers and so on. This relative to what's similar, because it's all about what's easy for us to compute. It's relativity and relativity to what's easy to compare. And in many ways, and this is true for lots of things in behavioral economics, is there are lots of things that are either for a good reason or at some point in our evolution history were for a good reason. But they're not necessarily always for a good reason, and not necessarily good reason now.
Right.
That's the real story.
So much
And,
good stuff there.
let me it's such a topic. So Dan Gilbert has these argument that our happiness is very relative. And there's a very famous paper that you take people who got badly injured, and you ask them a year after their injury how happy you are. And you get people who won the lottery, and you ask them a year after they won the lottery how happy you are. And it turns out that, being injured is worse than winning a lottery is better, but it's not a big deal. People change their state. Being injured is really miserable in the beginning. Winning a lottery, you're very happy in the beginning, and then people basically, in terms of how happy are you in 10-point scale, people adjust. And there's a real question of how much is the adjusting just a way of a response measure. If I get to be a millionaire, maybe I'm comparing myself to different people. So what's 10 is different, right? But there's also a real change in how we feel. And what happened is that this relativity is actually, it is running our life. So if you ask me, so I have pain every day. But I got used to it. So if you ask me how good is my day, I would say 8.5, or today maybe 8.7. And to some degree, it's not really true, because I would have loved not to have any pain. But to some degree, this relativity, where I tell you my happiness compared to my other days, is true because this is what's actually driving my decisions. Was my day today better than yesterday? What can I do tomorrow? And so on. So relativity is this thing that is really governing our lives. We're comparing today to yesterday, and we're thinking about happiness in this way. And once we get used to something, it's all about relativity.
That stasis that we find really drives those things. And like you were saying, once you reach that baseline stasis of whatever you're used to, you're just working within that bubble. And yep. I have a lot of questions for you about human happiness, but we're going to leave those for a second because I want to stay on relativity. So a lot of our listeners and people who are here today who are Lit All Access subscribers, we're so happy to have you. A lot of them own their own small businesses. And so it's really exciting for us to see so many people on the platform who might be looking to video books to help them grow. So, of course they could copy the model that you discovered with The Economist, but do you have any additional advice on how they could apply this relativity principle to their own practices in a general way?
Yeah. So look, first of all, we have to realize that kind of social science, behavioral economics, there's always a question of how we use things, right? We can use things and manipulate people in bad ways. There's ways that we can do it in a truthful way. And I think there's enough good that we can do in a truthful way, and it's best to stay away from the things that are not truthful. Now, if you think about what relativity really tells us, is that some dimensions are neglected because they don't have something to compare. And that doesn't mean that it's the right decision. So for example, if I'm trying to sell you a painting and I have only one painting, or one painting by that artist, and you have nothing to compare it to, am I doing you a favor? Not necessarily, because relativity is a good way for people to evaluate things. Taking it away is not necessarily getting things right. What if I try to help you figure out what's a good relative value for yourself? Now we're doing good. So if you think about the products that you're selling and you ask yourself, what are the dimensions of the products that people naturally don't pay enough attention to? And maybe on those dimensions, you want to create some relative evaluation so people can think about them differently. For example, I think that in many cases, people focus too much on the cost and not enough on the quality of the experience. And the reason is that with cost, relativity is always built in. This particular thing I'm thinking about cost $19.95 and this one cost $21.02. Very clear, the relativity is very clear. What about the other dimensions? What about the dimensions of joy? What about the dimension of memory? What about the dimension of meaning? Those things, if they don't have a representation and they don't have relativity, they're going to be underweighted. So if you think about it this way, you want to say, by what do I think is the right approach for people to make a decision in this category? And how do I make sure that the built-in relative evaluation, which are mostly just about price, how do I counteract them with other dimension? I'll give you another example from our personal lives. When we think about couples and we say, what do people bring to the relationship? How much income everybody is bringing is very clear. People bring 2 paychecks. How much kindness people bring, how much sense of humor, how much support. Those things are not as easily quantifiable. And because of that, in our personal lives, money is a bigger determinant of power in the relationship than sense of humor or kindness and so on. And what we would want to do is we would want to take it out, because we don't want a relationship to be defined too much by money. So we would want to make the other attributes quantifiable. We would want to make them measurable and so on. By the way, not easy to do, but that's the general principle. We want to say, what are people paying too much attention to? Maybe money, because it's quantifiable, easy to compare to. How do we make the other attributes more salient? You look at lots of categories and you say, I can't believe that people are choosing a different product than what they wanted because it cost $10 less. But again, $10 are very clear. If the quality is not clear, what do you expect people to do?
And you then compare it to a relative idea. Well, that's 2 coffees. That's a movie ticket, maybe in 1995, not today.
So you can quantify the dimension, you can add relativity, but we really have to understand that making decision is tough. The reason people make mistakes is that making decision is tough. And in our job, whether you're a policymaker or a business owner, our job is to help people make the best decisions that they can for themselves. That means sometimes describing things in a different way.
Absolutely. There's one other really great part of your work that comes up a couple of times, which is the IKEA effect. So really quickly, I just love for you to talk about the IKEA effect and just how it kind of helps us gain this relationship to our to our stuff.
Yeah. So in general, we think that we evaluate things based on what they are. That's not exactly true. There's a lot of things that go into evaluation that are not about what they are. It's about how fair is the price and how much has gone into them and how much meaning they have and all kinds of things, including how much effort has gone into this. And this is the story of the IKEA effect. And I'm sure everybody has put some IKEA furniture in together, and I'm sure you had the same experience as I did, which is it's frustrating, it's difficult, the instructions are complex, you have extra parts, sometimes they're missing parts, you put things the wrong way. it's not a fun afternoon.
It's not, but it's relatively inexpensive to buy IKEA furniture,
right.
which is
Right.
what's so interesting about it.
Yeah. And not only is it not a fun afternoon, what I noticed with my own IKEA furniture is I got extra attached to it, in the sense that it was cheap, not particularly good furniture, but I kept on carrying it from city to city as we moved around. And I started thinking about what is the effect of this commitment of time and effort into something. And we did a few experiments, and what we found is that people really have an inflated notion of the value of something once we have created it. And it doesn't stop there. It's not just that we over-evaluate it, we also don't understand that it's only us. We think everybody will evaluate it this way. So people say, oh, look at my amazing whatever, like think about kids and ashtray. We're just amazed with what we've created. We're very attached to it, but we also think that other people evaluate it as well. And that's the IKEA effect. And as we said before, you could say, what a mistake. Or you could say, what a wonderful part of humanity. So, how many of us during COVID have kind of stopped cooking, started eating out? What is the value of making things? What is the value of thinking that something is ours? What's the value of, going an ashtray or planting a garden and all kinds of things? And the reality is that we start liking things more when we invest effort into them, and it's good and bad. There's another interesting element for this, which this is also true for ideas as well. So the phrase "not invented here." It turns out that's true. If you ask people to solve world problems, water shortage, global warming, you name it, if people come up with an idea themselves, they think that idea is better. They're willing to commit more to it. But you could say, oh, maybe it is a better idea. So what we did is we gave people 50 words, and we say you can only pick 8 words from here, or maybe 10 that would spell one idea. And there was only one idea that was in there, so we knew what they would pick. But some people just got the idea, and some people had to work hard to find the idea. Even if it was fake, like it was the same idea, but they had to work hard for it. They thought it was a better idea. They're willing to commit more to it, to raise more money for it, to volunteer more for it. Is it a mistake? Classically speaking, yes. But do we want a way to get all of us to be excited about what we're doing? Absolutely, yes. So think about this in terms of how do we get people to be excited about what they're doing? Mostly in workplaces, people fight for who gets credit. Not such a good idea. You want everybody to get credit, right? Credit is not just credit, it's a way to basically help people get excited about what it is that they're doing. Anyway, so this the big umbrella idea is that we don't evaluate just the thing we get, we evaluate lots of things around it.
Right.
Effort that goes into it is one of them. And it's true for physical products, it's true for ideas, and it's something that we could utilize, both in terms of manipulating ourselves to like things better and helping other people feel more committed to a cause.
Excellent. Well, that kind of ties into our next theme, which is loss aversion, because now we've got this imagination running and this attachment happening. So in this clip, we are going to see a little background on loss aversion and an example that you give about buying a Mickey Mouse watch at an auction, as well as a familiar commercial. So let's take a look.
That's right. You don't even have to actually own something to be impacted by loss aversion. You just have to think about owning it.
We find that in experiments in auctions, the longer people were the highest bidder for something in an auction, the more they start integrate the product into their lives. So I'm bidding on some, I don't know, Mickey Mouse watch, and it's day 3, and I'm the highest bidder on that Mickey Mouse watch, and I start imagining the Mickey Mouse watch. And that process of imagining something creates higher attachment and basically higher evaluation. And it's one of the reasons why then people are willing to bid higher. Because before I did my first bid on this Mickey Mouse watch, I cared a little bit. But once I finished imagining for a whole day that I'm going to have it, now if somebody takes it away from me, no, I really want that, and I'm willing to go up.
Companies are very familiar with the concept of loss aversion.
I've been driving a Lincoln since long before anybody paid me to drive one.
And they spend billions each year on advertisements that put you in the driver's seat to give you a feeling of virtual ownership. The more you imagine yourself, wind in your hair, living the life of your dreams, the more you get attached to something that you don't even own.
Like many things in social science, the effects of ownerships are good and bad. It's a wonderful process. It's a process that creates a deep commitment and caring and so on. Would we want to give it up completely? Probably not. But are there things that we want to fix a little bit? Like the IKEA effect, or maybe the fact that we get overly attached to things by advertising and in auctions? Maybe yes. It's a process that we need to understand for good and for bad.
I love watching that little Mickey Mouse watch appear on your wrist and your eyes light up. So obviously, this is fascinating because we're experiencing this and we don't even know it, right? We're watching that Lincoln commercial. We don't even realize we want to be Matthew McConaughey. But how can companies ethically help people imagine themselves using their products? Like, what's the ethics here? And, you know, like we said, with these small business owners who might be watching today, what kind of imagery is most successful, but still that honors the human condition without manipulating people into...
So let's maybe start by saying something about loss aversion in general. And there's always the question of why do we have loss aversion? And the standard argument, you know, evolutionary psychology is a complex field, but the standard argument is that in nature, a mistake could be catastrophic. You could eat poison and die, negative infinity. On the positive side, there's nothing that gives you eternity. So the negative side can be really terrible. The positive side is always limited. You know, you could say, how much fun can we have? Like, you know, okay, how much chocolate can, like, what's the, on the downside, there's so much room for misery, right? So there's something very non-symmetrical about that. And you could argue that nature wants us to pay attention to the bad things that could kill us more than it wants us to pay attention to the positive things. So that's kind of the logic of loss aversion. The study with the Mickey Mouse watch is saying it doesn't have to be real ownership. It could be virtual ownership. It could be that you're just thinking about that. Now, the realization there is that virtual ownership is a closer replication of ownership than non-ownership. So let me say it differently. If I don't own something, how much can I imagine how excited I would be about this product? I'm limited because I'm not thinking about the losses. On the other hand, if I have virtual ownership, I'm closer to that. Right? So a few years ago, I bought a whiskey barrel with a couple of friends. We went to a distillery, we bought a whiskey barrel, we came to visit it every year to say hi, to try to see what it is. And then about 2 years ago, we bottled it and we got to pick our own brand and we got to give gifts to people and so on. Now, when we were trying to imagine how it would feel like, it was very tough. We're non-whiskey barrel owners, and it was tough to figure out how important this thing would be. It ended up being fantastic. It ended up that once a year we went together and we tried things differently, and it was just a wonderful, wonderful experience. And what you would want is, you would want a way to help people visualize in a better way how wonderful this experience was. So yes, there's lots of unethical things you could do, but the ethical thing is to say, I want people to be able to visualize how exciting owning this thing is going to be. And it's particularly true for things that people don't have good intuitions about. So if you say, how excited would I be if I have milk, I don't have milk, but for things that are unique and new, that's incredibly important. So we can argue that the experience with loss aversion is actually better. The second category is a category for things that we think people should be doing. Think about things that we think people in general are underdoing, not doing enough. And not saving enough, not buying enough insurance, not buying enough health food, not having enough, dental exams, medical exams, you name it. Those are places that I also feel quite comfortable using loss aversion, because I think this is something people just don't do enough of. I think people are under consuming it. So when people are under consuming something, I feel perfectly fine adding a little bit of oomph to that in the form of loss aversion.
Oh, that's so wise. So wise. Oh, absolutely love that. I do have a lot of Q&A questions coming in, and we are not shockingly running out of time because we could literally talk to you all day. But I know some of our viewers are excited to hear their questions. So are you cool if we hear from our audience a bit?
Sure.
Wonderful. So this is from Fabian. Hi, Fabian. Thanks for being here. Fabian wants to know, besides your book, of course, what material should one consume, be it webinars, other books, or anything else? I think maybe trying to get at, where are you learning and continuing to grow?
Yeah. So first of all, I try to get ideas from lots of places. Ideas come from blogs and academic papers and experiences. And the academic literature is wonderful, but there's lots of things that we still don't know about. So for example, next month I'm going to spend a week in the favelas in Brazil. These are the slums. Very, very tough places. I've been before, but I'm going to try and basically learn as much as possible. So I think that I go and visit, I try to meet people, I try to read about, I try to see what the academic literature is. There's a wonderful book called Rage, and that book emphasizes that we don't always know what knowledge we're drawing on, and investing in a more diverse knowledge is really quite effective. So I start by picking a problem, poverty, and then I try to learn as much as possible in it from many directions. Now, eventually, I'm an experimental guy. So eventually, what's proof for me is an experiment. Like if I talk to people or I watch something and so on, it's an interesting building block for knowledge, but it's not convincing me that I really know something. So I build knowledge, and then I decide what I'm really kind of sort of think is the main issue, and then I test it. But that's my approach. I use lots of things to improve myself as a hypothesis generating tool, and then I submit this to the research protocol.
Excellent. We're going to have to start doing our own tests and research at home then to really see if our real world experiences play out. So James would like to know, this is a little bit of a specific question, in the context of pricing, what are some factors that influence consumer perceptions of value, and how can businesses optimize pricing to increase sales?
Yeah, so there's lots. You probably all know the story about JCPenney. JCPenney was a store that was very famous for doubling prices and then halving them and call them 50% discount. And they had a very loyal following that loved that. And then a new CEO came and said, this is terrible, this is immoral, let's stop doing it, let's do everyday low prices. Let's stop with this kabuki theater of doubling and halving and saying 50% discount. Terrible results. Why? Because those were the people who loved this perception of bargains. And they kicked the CEO, they got the new one, they went back to the doubling and halving, and everybody was happy. Now, it's not true that everybody likes this approach, but there's a segment that loved that approach, trained on it, got used to it, and so on. And that segment was not willing to do something else. Another very interesting element in pricing is fairness. When you think about how come restaurants, how come we feel okay paying so much for food in restaurants? And I think that part of it is that we see all the locomotion. People are coming and going, they're moving chairs, they're moving plates, they're taking the forks, they're taking the crumbs away. I mean, there's a lot of activity out there. Imagine the following. Imagine you go to one of those coffee shops in San Francisco, and they put a little paper thing and they pour water and it's dripping into the cup and it takes 8 minutes and then they serve you a single, fill cup, and how much would you pay for it? Or imagine that they pre-made the coffee in a 1 gallon bucket and they just pour the bucket into your mug. How much would you pay now?
We call that bodega coffee in New York City.
and there's a big difference. And it's not about the coffee quality, it's about the effort that has gone into it. So when we think about pricing, it is very important to think about how do people figure out the value of this thing and what is missing? What is missing for them? And if something is missing, how do we fix it?
Excellent. James, I hope you got a lot out of that because my wheels are turning. We've got another question, and folks, we're going to run a couple minutes over, Dan, as long as that's okay with you. We've got 2 more questions coming in, and thank you so much for your time. This is so fascinating. Ted would love to know, if we teach your findings from Predictably Irrational in schools, how could it transform our approach to teaching decision-making skills?
Yeah. So look, I think a lot of social science is useful for understanding some of the mistakes that we can fall into. Now, if you know some of those mistakes, it doesn't mean you'll always avoid them. When I go to buy coffee, small, medium, large, I still succumb to some of those comparisons and relativity. You can't not do it. It's very, very tough.
Right.
So I think there are kind of 3 categories of decisions. There's little decisions that I don't think we can really fix. It's very, very tough. There are big decisions, and big decisions I think we can fix. I think we can get people to say, when you come to a big decision, analyze it, understand what the mistakes could happen. You have time. Big decisions, you usually have time, and you can think about it. And then there are decisions we call habits. They're not always habits, but we call them habits, things that are routinized, things that we do a lot. And those are usually small decisions, but because we make them a lot, the cost could be very high. And on those two, I think we can get people to work on eliminating bad habits and getting good ones. So if you ask me, what do I think we could do? I think we could slow people down on big decisions, get them to notice some blind spots, get to make some better decisions. I think you could get people to question their own decision-making ability and create some good habits and eliminate some bad ones. And then the other thing I would hope, and I think it's true, is that we could get people to be fascinated by human nature. One of the tough things, but also amazing things about human nature is that it changes all the time. My next book, I'll do a little plug. My next book is about, the name is Misbelief, and it's all about people who start believing in alternative narratives, including conspiracy theories. 10 years ago, if you asked me what are the dangers to our modern way of life, I wouldn't tell you that fake news is high up there. Now I think it is. The world has changed. The world has changed, and social science changes with it. The world before Facebook and Twitter is different than the world after that. Not from physics, not from chemistry, but from human psychology. Absolutely. So I think it's also, social science is one of the cases where knowledge keeps on changing all the time. Even our attitude to honesty. Changes in fake news, politicians and so on, it doesn't go without affecting lots of things. So that's the amazing thing about social science. It's wonderful, right? There's new topics to study all the time, but it also means that we can't just, let's say we were all going to sit here and design a new curriculum for education, or we can't. We need to keep an eye on the time and change things as they move along. So I think fascination for human nature and paying attention to the surrounding conditions would be the other pieces.
Beautiful. And kids are so curious, and keeping that as an adult, I think, is something that I've always really admired in your approach to your work. Final question. This is from Anonymous, so I hope you're out there. How will increasing access to technologies like AI affect and change our decision-making process? Hot topic, AI, Dan. What do you think about it?
I'm still struggling with it. I think there's not such a thing as AI, because, in the same way that there's no such thing as food. Like if you say, how is food going to change humanity? There's lots of potentially good and bad ways to do it. And I think the same thing is true for AI. I'll tell you what I'm mostly worried about. I think there's going to be some good things, but I'll tell you what I'm mostly worried about. I'm mostly worried about the potential for fake news. I'm mostly worried that there'll be like a generic fake news, and then there'll be a filter, and each of us will get the fake news that is designed specifically for our proclivities. It will design for our background and our current emotional state. That really frightens me. The amazing thing about all of this model of how quickly they can adapt, right? I'm sure you've all played with this, right? But you write something, and then you say, make it 5th grade reading level, and here it is. Or then you say, write it like Shakespeare. Here it is. It's kind of an amazing thing. But if you think about those filters and you say, what if they were not designed for good, but they were designed for persuasion? That really worries me. So I'm worried about fake news in general, but this looks to me like an extra power that I'm not sure no, I'm sure I don't want. It worries me. Will some good things come out of it? For sure. Contract law. Lots of lawyers basically end up writing the same contract. You could get AI to write 90% with the mutual understanding that everybody trusts the same bot. So I think there's going to be all kinds of wonderful things. And maybe last comment, and this is just speculation. I think an interesting question will be, how much will people trust AI? So I think right now people don't understand the mistakes it's making. So I think it's trusted. Like, imagine you got resumes from people, and it says, "Oh, this resume was created by an AI." Oh, I thought, we played in the lab by resume. They're terrible. They make up lots of things. But I think people have too much trust in AI right now. But moving forward, I think that will be an interesting and important issue. Because if AI would be trusted, that's a very different world. And if we think that it's 10% wrong, maybe we would not trust it at all, right? Mm-hmm. What does it mean if 10% could be wrong? Do we trust it 90%, or do we say, "Oh, I never want to make a mistake, so I never trust it"? I think that will be a really interesting issue. We did a study once in which we had either a bot or a human person giving stock market advice. And the advice was great. At some point it was terrible. And then it kept on being good. And the question is, how quickly will people forgive the agent? And who will they forgive faster? And people forgave the human agent faster. Mm-hmm. And I think it's because we've seen people being wrong before. And we know that people are wrong, and we expect it. We don't expect algorithms to be wrong. When an algorithm is wrong, it kind of, what does it mean? How can it be wrong? Now we don't trust it completely. So anyway, I think the question of trust and wrong and mistakes and so on will be really interesting.
And relativity. I know I make a mistake, so it's easier for me to go, "Oh, Dan, it's all right. I've done that before."
That's right.
But I'm not a computer, and I'm not AI, and I don't have a robot who's walking around my house who I can mitigate, and kind of evaluate and assess what kind of mistakes they make and how critical they are. So that is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating. Dan, you are just an absolute legend in your field. We cannot thank you enough for having this chat with us today. Can you please tell everyone where they can get Misbelief? I know I am going to be pre-ordering it today. Is it available for pre-order? What's the best way for us to purchase this?
Available pre-order. Just check my website. Lots of places to get it. It's a big problem. When I started writing it, I thought I'll have a chapter at the end that says, "Here are solutions." I ended up having sections I call hopefully helpful. It's a hairy, complex problem. Don't come to it with the expectation that I can offer simple solutions, but I think it's something we need to understand and we need to reason about, and then we need to figure out how to improve.
Absolutely. I'm so excited to read it. This is a topic that my friends and I discuss all the time. We also know that there is a new TV series that is coming up that was picked up based on Predictably Irrational. Is that right?
Yeah. So there's a show that will air on September 25th on NBC called The Irrational. Jesse Martin is playing my character, a professor. I love being part of the writing and watching it being filmed and so on. I hope you'll enjoy it as well.
Excellent. I can't wait to see it. Jesse Martin is a legend as well from the theater and film world. So how exciting. Well, thank you so much for this incredible talk. I learned so much. I can't wait to go back and watch it again. Everyone who's here, we are going to be sending out a link. So if there were bites or pieces of information that you can apply to your everyday lives or your businesses, you'll be able to have access to those things. We're also going to be following up with a survey. We'd love your feedback. We're going to keep doing these fireside chats as we're really excited to bring you these intimate, close talks with our incredible authors on our Lit Video Books platform. So we'd love to know how we can keep improving that, who you want to hear from, what kind of things you want to hear in these chats. So please fill that out. It would be really helpful for us to make sure that we can keep coming to you live with these awesome experiences. And we are excited to announce our next chat is going to be with the author of Truth and Lies, What People Are Really Thinking. It's a book about body language and communication by the fantastic Mark Bowden and Tracy Thompson. And that video book just launched a couple months ago on the Lit Video Books app and website. So please go check it out if you haven't seen it. There's a lot of fun live action, narrative, storytelling in it, as well as incredible research and ideas from Tracy and Mark. So we're excited to talk to them. Be sure to check it out, and also stay tuned for updates on the date and time for those for that fireside chat. So thank you again, Dan. So great to see you. Have a wonderful rest of your summer. Good luck in Brazil. We'll talk soon.
Care.
All right. Bye, everyone.